Thank you for downloading this podcast from Talk Radio 702. For more podcasts and more information on your number one news and talk station, please visit 702.co.za.
Your family, your community, your country, your responsibility. Be the best citizen you can be. Click on the Leader Say banner on this website to find out about your rights and responsibilities.
Talk Radio 702. Comment by David O'Sullivan.
I want to tell you the story of a security guard named Mike Mofokeng. In September 2009, he reported a robbery at the place he was guarding. He went to the police and told them, solid citizen, don't you think? 2 months later, he was collected from his place of employment by police officers, including one warrant officer, Simelane, and he was taken to Joburg Central Police Station. Now remember, Mofokeng's the man who has laid this charge, or has tried to lay the charge of robbery. He's not the suspect. He's the complainant at best. He could possibly be a witness. But instead of being treated like that, Mofokeng found himself being treated as the suspect and subjected to torture. As he told the North Gauteng High Court, one of the officers, identified as Shezi, made him lie on his stomach with his hands cuffed behind him and his ankles tied together. Shezi poured water on a car tire's inner tube, which was then pulled tight over his face, causing him to suffocate. This was done 4 times. Shezi kept saying to Mofokeng that he must tell the truth. He was also hit with open hands, and he suffered an injury to the head in a scuffle as he tried to resist the attacks. Mofokeng told the court he suffered excruciating pain and he feared he would die. So he made a false confession that he had received some money as his role in the robbery. He wanted to stop the beatings and the torture, and he took the police, including Simelane and Shezi, to his aunt's house, where in front of family members as witnesses, he then told the police he'd lied to them about receiving money. He wanted his relatives to know that if he did die, if anything untoward happened to him, they would know where to find him in the hands of the police. This was the way he could get witnesses. He was beaten again, taken back to the police station, held for a further 2 days before being released. He then sued the police for unlawful arrest and detention and for unlawful assault. Warrant Officer Simelane, giving evidence, denied the assault. He said the arrest was lawful, but he couldn't explain why he hadn't followed certain procedures, such as making entries into his police pocketbook. He never produced the docket nor the occurrence book at the police station where Mofokeng was held. The judge in this matter, Judge Ledwaba, rejected the police version of events. He accepted Mike Mofokeng's version. He described the police officer's actions as unlawful, unjustified, and malicious. He said the probabilities are that Warrant Officer Simelane wanted to extract a confession out of Mofokeng and confess, in inverted commas, to the crime. He forced him to talk. The Pretoria High Court then awarded Mike Mofokeng damages in the amount of 170,000 rand. Now, when I read this judgment, and all that information I've given you comes out of the judgment, I was struck here by the section of how Mofokeng was tortured, having the inner tube of the tire pulled across his nose and mouth. The slang for this type of torture is being tubed. The person is tortured by slowly being suffocated. And it reminded me of the finding in the autopsy of the Davidson taxi driver, Mira Macia, who was found to have suffocated. And I couldn't help but wonder if this is what had happened to him as well, whether this inner tube had been pulled over his nose and mouth. Possibly a murder trial will reveal more. What we do know now in this Mofokeng case, and this has been confirmed by the judge, is that the police tortured an innocent man by tubing him. We know this because Mike Mofokeng was able to successfully sue the police. And it begs the question how many more such cases like this happen in police cells, but because the suspect's unable to secure legal representation or lives in fear of reprisals if he takes any action against the police, we never know that it's happened. In fact, at this point, I'd like to bring in the attorney who represented Mike Mofokeng, Marius Toit from Toit Attorneys. Marius, thanks for your time. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, David. Thanks for having me.
What happens now? Is there going to be a criminal case? Because the judge has accepted Mike Mofokeng's version of events. This is a civil matter. What about a criminal charge?
Well, I think, David, one would hope that the state attorney, who obviously represents the Minister of Safety and Security, or the Minister of Police in this instance, would go forward and actually press charges against the individual, but I doubt whether they would. You remember, no charges were brought, and this matter came from 2009. So we are now in 2013, so we're talking about 4 years down the line. There's nothing that prohibits them from bringing charges, but I somehow doubt that. I think they might institute disciplinary action against Simelane, and let's hope he be removed from the South African Police Force.
Is Mike Mofokeng himself not interested in laying a charge of assault against this man?
I think he might be, David. I haven't canvassed it with him, obviously, after the judgment was handed down. And I will definitely gauge him on it. I doubt it if he wants to go through another full-blown trial, because every time he has to testify about the matter, of course, that's a trauma in itself. And I think he would love to put the matter behind him and carry on with his life.
He obviously described the situation to you, Marius. Can you just expand on this tubing that happened?
Well, David, it's quite horrendous, but I mean, tubing is something that has often surfaced in criminal courts, and seldom do the courts actually find that it does occur, just because the onus in criminal trials are usually beyond a reasonable doubt, and the courts often say, well, listen, there's not enough evidence to corroborate your version. What happened in this instance, though, is that Mr. Mofokeng, after he was released from custody, actually went to hospital. And a doctor there on duty, Shipalana, recorded his injuries on Form J88. Now, of course, there's no injuries that are shown with regards to the tubing, but the other injuries he sustained are actually consistent with somebody that's obviously being tied up, somebody that was cuffed. He had a blow to his head, and he explained that the blow occurred when he tried to resist both the police officers who sat on his back with a tube around his face. Now, what they do is, it's a piece of the inner tube, and they put water. They hold it like a sort of a container, and they put water in it. And then the water and the rubber tube, with a person pulling it on both sides of the head, then pulls it shut around the face. So the person cannot get air, and if he tried to get air, he would be taking the water in. So it just prevents. So what happens is the person, if this happens continuously, the fear of death, of course, sets in. And the person then realized, well, listen, if I don't talk, I might very well die.
And it was interesting, his tactic of then making the story and then going to his relative's house so that he could be seen with the police.
Well, I thought, personally, I thought that was quite brilliant. Keeping in mind that he was under immense pressure when the torture actually occurred. And if one keeps in mind the fact that, here's a person that's being tortured by not one police officer. One has to remember the testimony of Simelane was that there were several police officers who were involved in the questioning. I think he referred to 5 or 6 at one stage that assisted, that would take turns in questioning. Now, of course, they denied ever there was a torture and assault. But I mean, it begs the question. The advocate that defended or that assisted us in the matter, Advocate Combrink, specifically made the point that, they must have questioned him for at least 4 to 5 hours. And the funny thing was, David, that of course this police officer deemed it appropriate not to make entries into his pocketbook.
Yes.
And the pocketbook is, of course, a standing order. Any police officer that comes on duty or goes off duty immediately has to make entry into his pocketbook. And that's like a reference. That's for any person to see what he was doing. And he decided not to keep a record and to deliberately leave it at home. And that, of course, adds up to the fact that, the whole picture that is painted is one of, I'm trying to hide the fact that I picked up a witness in a matter. I tortured him for confession, and because I couldn't do anything more, I just left it and rather have no footprints left in the matter.
Yeah, well, Judge Ledwaba didn't buy that. Marius, thank you very much. I know if there are any changes, you'll let me know about that. Marius de Toit there, the attorney at de Toit.